Apologize for the delay. First matter on the agenda is the minutes from the last meeting and the approval letter. Any discussion or motions?
I was not here in June, and so there needs to be some corrections on, it has me making a motion and voting, and I think God as well, so that needs to be corrected.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I think what the issue is, I have Carrie making the motion, which should be corrected, but in the bottom part, I was stating the corrections that should have been made from the previous meeting.
Yeah, where dot is included is in parentheses.
Right,
In quotation marks. So.
yeah, but I do need to correct the first part of this where it says that you make the motion.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other discussion or corrections? How about a motion?
I move we accept the minutes as corrected.
There's a motion on the table. Can I have a second?
Second.
There's a motion up for the vote. Any discussion on the motion?
I'll abstain since I was not here.
I'm abstaining as well.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, let's take a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as corrected, as discussed, say aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, minutes are approved with the corrections. Make a motion to approve the approval letter as drafted.
Approve, recommend approval. Make a motion to approve.
So we got a motion, and I'll second that motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes.
I'm abstaining.
That was funny.
So the next matter is the case to be heard, singular. Is the representative of the owner here?
Yes.
Wonderful. Everybody, you need anybody else?
Just me.
Just you. All right, you're welcome to come on up. And then let's go ahead and read into the record the opening statement.
Opening statement to the applicant. If you're not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Committee, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the committee's decision. You are advised to seek independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed within a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied.
All right, with that, we'll turn the mic over to staff for a brief summary of the request.
Today's application is 2019-00008. It's 5040 and 5042 Limbar Drive. It's tax map 148, parcels 183 and 285. It's in Council District 30. The applicant today is requesting to allow the disturbance of the 75-foot floodway buffer of Sawgram Branch to renovate 2 existing buildings and construct new townhome apartments, to allow continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the buffer area, to construct the construction and encroachment of minimally disruptive hardscape to reroute an existing sidewalk to a location further from the floodway. They're requesting waiver of buffer signage, and they're also requesting no floodproofing or raising of the existing structures to 1 foot above the BFE. For for commercial structures and 4 feet for residential structures. The appellant is Robert Matthews of LB and Associates LLC, and his representative is Trip Smith of S&H Engineering. Stormwater staff has no comments. Codes has no comments. Planning is deferring to Stormwater, and Greenways defers the decision to the committee.
Wonderful. Chip, the floor is yours.
So unfortunately, Trip couldn't be here today. He would make this a lot faster and sound smarter. So you're stuck with me. Apologies for that. Also, if Trip was here, he probably would have brought a laser pointer. So I didn't. Sorry about that. So what we're looking at right now is the existing condition of the property. I'm gonna walk over here, but presumably talk loud enough so everyone can hear me. So what we're looking at is Sorghum Branch. This is 5040 Linbar, 5042 Linbar. As you can see, floodway delineated, zone 1, zone 2 buffers. In both situations, the existing buildings, including a lot of parking on both sides, are within both buffers. Sometimes, even in some cases, well, I guess it's close. Some parking way up here is in the floodway, actually. So we are proposing a list of variances, some of which are a little bit more straightforward than others. The proposed development would include the renovation of the existing buildings, in addition to which, on each side in the parking areas that we have, townhome developments. The intent is to do affordable housing. Unclear at this point if we're talking about little a, little h, or big A, big H, but that is the intent. Representative Potts unfortunately couldn't make it this morning. He and I spoke. He said he's willing to write a letter. He texted me this morning. He believes that the concept is sound, and he wants us to pursue an affordable housing concept on this property if we can make it, but he just couldn't be here today. So I'm going to go through the variances a little bit, but just kind of under the context of, the purpose of this meeting is to address unique situations. I believe that we have a unique situation that is appropriate for variances, the variances that are requested. So the few, again, I'm kind of working my way, I'm not going to go in order as listed, but a few of the variances to allow continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the buffer area, construction and encroachment of minimally disruptive hardscape to reroute a sidewalk, and waiver of buffer signage. Can I go to my site plan? Unfortunately, this isn't in color. So by virtue of the fact that the buildings are already in the buffers, we're in a situation where if we were to say no mow in certain areas, say here's the building, it's not completely clear. Here's 5042, here's 5041, and then zone 1, zone 2 buffers. So we're sitting in a situation that if we go no mow, that we're not mowing areas that are right around the building. We're not suggesting that we go too far into near the floodway, just around areas of the building, such that it makes sense. For example, if we were in a situation where we weren't going to mow right up here on Linbar, that obviously would be very attractive. Construction in the zone 132. So what we're proposing is there's certain areas, you can't see the call out, so I apologize about that, of current parking. Here's an area, kind of the dash lines. I don't know if you got all this in your packet, where we're talking about removing existing parking. So our net removal of impervious area within the buffers is in excess of 10,000 square feet. So we're going to remove, there we go. That's even better. So we're going to, our net removal will be 10,000 square feet. So that's what the construction relates to. Additionally, construction relates to some, sidewalk rerouting. So, for example, right now we've got a sidewalk that's in zone 1. We would want to move it out to the new parking lot as much as possible. So again, moving as much things out of the buffers as we can, minimally disruptive. That is the construction in the zone 1, zone 2 buffer that we're seeking. Additionally, signage. We're not opposed to all signage, of course, if we need to farther up in these areas, but the buildings are in the buffers. So it depends on what that type of signage is. If we're talking about continuous sign or something like that, that would obviously be a problem given the location of the buildings. So that's 3 of the variances: the no-mow, construction to reroute sidewalk, and then waiver of the buffer signage. And then the addition is, an additional variance is allow disturbance within the buffers to renovate the buildings. These are currently vacant. The current owners, my client has it under contract. The current owners have been trying to lease either or building for a very long period of time with no success, mainly because people seem to believe the commercial concept isn't working in this area. So what we're pursuing is a townhome concept, and due to the fact that the buildings are in the buffers on each side, the existing buildings are in the buffers on each side, to renovate, we would obviously be doing work in the buffer. So we would need a variance to pursue renovations of the buildings as is. It's variance 4. Variance 5 is an elevation variance. So right now, 5040 is, I don't have the flood elevation certificate in front of me. It's, there it is. Finished floor is I think it's closer to 3 feet above base flood elevation. 5042 is 4 inches above base flood elevation. Now, if you look at, and I don't think I've got a picture in the packet of showing this, if you look at the front door of 5042, there's a stoop built up, obviously with the idea of, or what base flood elevation was when they built that building however long ago, or retrofitted it with the stoop. But it is currently only 4 inches above base flood elevation. So what we would be seeking is a variance to allow us to, so we're in a situation where we're commercially zoned. These are currently commercial buildings that are were commercially constructed under the code. We're pursuing an adaptive residential development concept, which is allowed, permitted with conditions in commercial zoning, but we will travel, based on my conversation with codes, travel under a lot of the commercial zoning bulk regs. We're gonna have to sprinkler it, it's built steel. So we're in this situation where while the concept is residential, the buildings itself and how it will be treated by codes, based on my conversation with John Michael, will be commercial. So as a result, we're in a situation where if we're classified as residential, then our finished floor elevation has to be 4 feet above base flood elevation, which just wouldn't be possible with the existing buildings. They wouldn't be able to renovate them just how they are. If we are considered commercial for the purposes of this discussion, then 5040 is fine. 5042 can handle some dry proofing and other measures that would accommodate the 8 inches that we lack, and we would want to pursue that concept. I think that I'm done and would welcome any questions.
Is there anyone here from the public to speak for or against this request? Seeing none, let's turn it over to the panel. Questions?
So the proposed townhouses are all elevated 4 feet above, is that correct?
And the existing buildings?
Proposed.
The proposed, yes, they're all 4 feet above, correct.
So, I mean, adaptive reuse, I think, allows you in certain commercial zonings in the urban zoning overlay to develop properties as a mixed use or residential. And I think that when you get your building permit or when you get your use, it's going to say residential. I don't think it's going to say commercial.
Right.
I know in your discussion here you want to sort of consider it commercial, but in reality it's going to be residential. And so it does concern me that those residences, those potential people that live in that building, is it a 2-story building, 1-story building?
3-story.
So that's a 3-story building, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One thing that I forgot to mention.
Okay.
Which I think is very important.
Okay.
There's no flooding in this building or on this property.
Yeah, that's the next question I was going to
Yes,
ask.
during
But I was going to
2010.
ask that to staff, if they had any record of damage on this property in your inventory from the 2010 flooding. Okay, so
Representative Potts actually told me, again, I'm sorry, that there's an apartment complex, you can't really see it, on the other side right here.
Right.
With a pool that's actually lower. And according to his memory, they didn't have any flooding either.
yeah, okay. So I assume that this branch was looked at most recently in FEMA's update, correct? And so, I mean, we have a base flood elevation, and so, you know, based upon some experts, or I guess the expert, the flood elevation is what it is. And so ultimately, in a 100-year event, you would be within 4 inches, and our requirement's 4 feet. So I have a little bit of concern about that. I just want to hear what else is being said.
How many units do you have per floor? Is it
In the existing building,
Are the two existing buildings, the proposed layout the same? You were done, right?
Yeah.
The two, are the proposed reconfigurations, interior reconfigurations the same for the two buildings?
and so are we looking at the same floor plan in each building?
Yeah.
Yes, my understanding is. Unfortunately, client couldn't be here this morning. He would be able to speak to that more so.
And how many units are you putting on the first floors of each building?
I don't know off the top of my head, fortunately. So my understanding is the proposed concept, including the new buildings, would be 104 units total.
140 units?
4.
104. Wow, that's a lot.
But the other buildings, of course, would be outside of the buffers and above the.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about those. I'm really concerned about how many units you've got in the first floor of each of those buildings. And whether or not there can be a different configuration.
Maybe mixed use or even commercial on the lower level.
Or even a common area
Yeah.
that's not residential. The problem is residential is you're talking about people sleeping there and flooding, and they're living there when it happens. It's what makes it very different from commercial property.
So when you met with staff originally, I mean, what kind of discussion was there? Was there concerns raised about the residential aspects of these two buildings, or?
It's a long life. Excuse me. It's a question that we talk about all the time. Apartments, are they really commercial or are they really residential? And I think we get different information from codes that we do from FEMA guidance. I think the discussions that we had on this project was that these were existing buildings and that they're compliant with FEMA requirements, not ours, and we were just going to defer to the committee to make a decision on it.
Okay.
What do you mean by compliant with FEMA requirements but not ours?
Sure. So Metro's requirements is that all commercial buildings are raised 1 foot above the 100-year or floodproof to that 1 foot above, and that residential requirements are 4 feet above the 100-year. So FEMA sets minimum standards, and we could either adopt them or we could go with higher standards.
So what are the
FEMA's
minimum standards?
on residential?
I think it's right at the 100-year, right at the 100-year for
Yeah, I think
residential
it's-
and commercial.
Oh, really? You don't have to have a freeboard?
Metro, like I said, it's the Metro requirement that has a 4 foot and a 1 foot.
Interesting.
Also, to your point about people living in these units on the first floor, this will be a commercially managed, operated project. The risks associated with such an event, which again, we didn't have one in 2010, nor in February, would be on the owner of the commercial.
It's been built out as apartments,
Yes,
even the townhomes?
yes, yes, it'd all be apartments.
Huh. Any way they could convert it to condos later on? Or is there a
I mean,
reason
that would
it couldn't be?
that would be an architect codes issue about how they built it that I'm not prepared to answer. But my understanding is they want to pursue, like this is an owner that owns, operates, maintains the developments.
Is there any issue with access? I can't see the rest of the limb. Is that Linbar? I can't read that.
No, we have.
Yeah, it's on bar.
If you zoom out, like, can you get access to that both ways?
Yeah, so we've got access to Limbar here and access to Limbar here.
But for each side, the two sides don't connect over the
Correct.
tributary.
Correct.
So you have one access for one side and one access for the other side.
Yeah.
You said townhome apartments. Does that mean that they're multi-level? When I think of townhomes, I think of 2 stories, and when I think of apartments, just...
Unfortunately, I'm not prepared to answer that question. I'm sorry. I'm going to blame it on the fact that Tripp's in Alaska. Sorry. I don't want to say something stupid.
And
More so than I've already done.
the flooding inundation lines seem to show that this did not flood and this did not flood. But if I'm interpreting this correctly, this area was flooded. So it looks like the access might have been flooded.
Mm-hmm.
So what are our standards as far as parking? Can it be at any elevation in the floodplain?
It can, yes.
So, wow.
The only time we have a requirement for parking is in Metro Center, where it's protected by levee.
Okay.
we need Dodd.
You think so?
I mean, as you presented them, you know, kind of each of them in order, yeah, the request for the disturbance and the you know, none of those are really an issue for me, but it is the fact that it is residential and people are gonna be sleeping there, that I'm having a little bit hard time getting over.
Yeah, I think that's probably whatever we're all
Yeah.
thinking. The
Yeah.
problem is the residential on the first floors of the two buildings.
You know, it's a pretty good redevelopment of property. They're going to be spending a lot of money. And you would think that there could be some attempt, other than no attempt, to do some flood protection or something of the lowest building anyway.
Or at least some analysis to us on why it can't be done or
Sure.
something could be done.
I'm generally comfortable with the other building as it's 2.5 feet above the flood elevation. I think I'm okay with that. But the lower building, I just think it needs to be looked at in more detail. In my
Would that
opinion.
be a situation where flood proofing, because I guess we're in a conversation now where if we're talking about we need to raise it.
No.
Yeah,
Just flood proofing. From my perspective,
Sure.
I think it'd be flood proofing.
right.
Well, I don't know how many entrances are into that building, or how many exits?
One.
So, does that meet? Does it not need another point of access?
I presume it's got one, actually not.
Yeah, there's
I
probably
presume it's
more
got
than
in the
one.
back, yeah.
Yeah,
I think they don't require fire.
yeah.
Second
Let me-
floors.
I think so.
I'm sorry, there's one in the back and the front.
Yeah, I'm sure there
Yeah.
is 2 points. So there may be some creative way to do flood protection of this building. But,
Floodproofing
Flood-
applies to commercial properties only.
okay.
Why is that? What's the thought process that?
I do not know. We've just strictly adopted what FEMA says.
So FEMA,
Once again, these appear to be compliant with FEMA requirements.
right,
So it's just a metro requirement.
okay.
Had they consider putting a mixed use and having something on that bottom floor other than residential?
Well, yes, they have. And again, I think I'm going to refer to their opinion. They've looked at this property a couple different ways. Not been able to gauge interest in terms of who would go in there for retail, commercial. The fact it's been vacant for a very long period of time sort of speaks to what the market wants to see in that area. And they just think, and in conjunction, they've worked with Representative Councilmember / Councilmember Potts on this issue, and I think he might have actually been the one who proposed, like, why don't you look at affordable housing there? And that's when we sort of began to go that way.
So FEMA doesn't require any freeboard on residential property. Metro requires 4 feet.
Yes, sir.
How long has it been 4 feet? Is that something that happened recently because of?
No, sir.
It's been decades, yeah.
That is a significant difference.
Well, it was good when we had the flood on Cumberland River, wasn't it?
Metro, by going above and beyond the FEMA requirements, I don't want to say it gets kickbacks, but the people in the floodplain that have to buy flood insurance get a lower premium because we're going above and beyond the requirement.
Okay, so it helps us with our ratings or whatever
Yes,
we
sir.
get with FEMA. So there's a reason they did, okay.
And I
Well,
think
we've
that-
granted
didn't
variances in
Roger
the
kind of
past
speak-
to allow people to go less than 4 feet. Rarely, but we have done it.
Sure. I mean, the idea is that you could apply for a variance to build to FEMA.
Right.
We would like to say we would not let anything come before you that's going to come lower than FEMA's requirements.
Right.
This one project, I mean, this one variance would not affect our ratings with FEMA. Can't say for
Yeah.
sure, but probably.
I'm gonna use what Chip said, is I'm not prepared to answer that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they know we have a committee that looks at variance cases. At any given moment, they could, we have regular audits that'll come and say, I want to see elevation certificates, I want to see information, building permits, for any building that they deem they want to see, and we're prepared to give all that information to them at request.
I think that's when Roger Lindsay came and spoke to us and just was reminding us of kind of the extra steps we've taken, how that impacts it, and just charging, or asking the committee to take all that into consideration, so.
Well, no, personally, I can't vote on this today. I'm not comfortable with it. I think there should be more analysis done, or a little more information to us to see if there's a way that they can maybe do a little additional protection on that lower level, or maybe even look at options of different types of uses. And that's just my take. So if I was requested to vote on this today, I would vote no.
As far as an approval.
Correct.
All right, well, there's 1 out of your 6.
I'm in the same boat.
I'm gonna say I'm in the same boat as well.
That shows you where we are.
Sure. Let me ask a question. Because the way my understanding of where we are in the due diligence process we have under contract is, before we have the opportunity to come back, I think that my clients would have to make a decision, and they were depending upon this hearing as to whether or not they can make a decision. I don't suppose there's any way to suggest that a conditional study or anything like that.
Typically, what people do in your boat right now would ask for a 1-month deferment, which automatically puts you on next month's calendar, so you don't have to resubmit today.
Sure.
And then at that meeting, you can provide the additional information that you think we're probably looking for, or modifications that you think would allow us to vote and approve it. So I based on the discussion, I think what most of us are uncomfortable with is the building on the right-hand side of the picture I'm looking at being so close to that 100-year level, and some more information on how many units are in that first floor, how they're being used, what kind of, the issue for us is not the environmental concerns with the buffers, because it seems like you're making improvements to the property. The issues with us are emergency concerns for those people, because that is also one of the things we're supposed to look at. And so we just have questions as to whether or not a full build out of residential units on that first floor is necessary, or something that we should be approving. Because when we give a variance, it's supposed to be limited to reasonable use of the property.
Because I'm going to get at
Necessary to afford living.
I'm sorry?
The minimum necessary.
Minimum necessary, thank you. I couldn't remember the language yet, so it's
So,
minimum
because I'm going to
necessary.
get asked this question, in a situation, hypothetical, where we go all residential in the property on the left, we go residential above the first floor on the property on the right, and do something other than residential on the bottom floor, the one on the right.
I'm thinking that's better, and that there's a good chance I think we could vote and approve that. I can't promise you that, but
Sure.
based on the discussion that I've heard, I think that's where I would fall.
Okay.
And so if you're talking about 104 units, if that knocks out like 10, that's why I was asking about the unit
Sure,
numbers.
absolutely.
Whether or not it's still a feasible project and still gets the minimum necessary to properly use this property. And I think probably this is a great reuse of the property.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of the safety concerns of that first floor of that right building.
Sure, okay. That would be instructive, because again, my client's going to have to make a decision whether or not to pursue purchase of the
Right.
property. And okay,
So to do that, you would request right now a deferment for 1 month.
I would like to request a deferment for 1 month.
All right, the applicant has requested deferment. Any other discussion?
So I'll make a motion that we defer for 1 month.
Yeah, I
Do
think
that?
that's right, yeah.
Okay. So,
All right, we got a
based upon the
motion.
applicant's request, I recommend that, I move that we make a 1 month deferral of this.
And I'll second that motion. Any discussion on the motion for a 1 month deferral? Seeing none and vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Chip.
Thank you.
All right. We've got no business. Yes.
I might add a little additional information, generally speaking, on the base flood elevations and what we require. Tom Palco is the one who understands the full history of our program, and he, ironically, is at a National Floodplain Conference right now, him and Roger Lindsay. My understanding is a lot of our elevations go back to the mid-'70s flood on Mill Creek and some of those areas. where there was substantial loss, and the community's will was to put these elevation levels in place, which, as Roy mentioned, did save a lot of damage in subsequent floods and in obviously the 2010 flood. Obviously, you got two types of floods. You're thinking about the Cumberland River flood, where there's a latency on the crest, and then up in some of the river segments like this one, I think probably where you're looking at more flashy floods, your flash flood type floodings. I did want to add that I know FEMA and a lot of cities are considering elevating the base flood elevation. It's been thrown out a little bit.
You mean re-studies, or do you mean they're adding a freeboard to the?
Adding freeboard, yeah, I'm sorry. Obviously, just discussion, and I know Nashville has been held up as an example to a lot of other cities that are incurring tremendous damage in some of these recent flood events by our flood standards. Also, Steve mentioned the community rating system and the significance of that in protecting the citizens. I'm also on the community planning team for Metro's hazard mitigation plan, and when you go through that process every 5 years, we have to certify to TEMA and FEMA what we as a community are doing to mitigate risk in certain disaster situations. When you evaluate the disasters likely to hit Metro, and there's a scoring system that goes into that, flooding is always at the very top. So when we're looking at our action plan and what we're putting together to deal with that for the sustainability of Metro, that's something that we are always looking at. And one of the things that we do always reference are our standards, your involvement with these things, staff's involvement with these things, the oversight we provide, our office inspecting and requiring maintenance of detention ponds. So it's you get down to just one standard question, and do you meet the standard? But behind that, in protecting the community, it's a lot bigger network of things going on. So I just wanted to add that. But Tom Palco can certainly answer the specifics on how some of these things came about over time.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Anybody want to make up business?
I got a couple items like that. So I guess potentially now we have 4 on the agenda for next time, maybe 5 if this one comes back.
Great.
I know previously I approached you guys about electronically receiving submittals. Development Services has gone complete electronic with our submittals all the way through the review, through the approval process. So literally the only cases we get to the front desks that are paper copies are your cases. We would still love to go electronic. We've, like I said, brought this up to you guys once before. I think you guys were a little hesitant, but it's something really the department would like to move forward with, and just planting the seed for now. And then maybe in an upcoming meeting, I'd like to maybe get a show of hands if we could go electronic with ours as well.
Do we have iPads that we could use?
I thought we had some in the Sunny West conference room. I thought there was some computers up there.
The main thing for me is I need to be able to expand on the screen to view the close-up, because the screen and someone else running it doesn't provide what I need. That's the only reason that I need the papers, because I'm flipping through looking at certain things, and not everybody wants to look at the same stuff at the same time. And so that if we had iPads, which I believe the community could probably afford 7 of them, then I could see that making sense. That would be my concern. I don't know what
Okay. Noted.
All right. Any other business?
I was going to give you all an update on the Precision Homes decision, which was the case arising out of the variance on Miami Avenue, I think it was. It was a very favorable ruling for Metro, but I neglected to bring the case decision with me, and so I'm going to give you a more detailed review of that decision next month.
Could you bring the opinion too? I didn't realize
I will.
that's interesting.
We can circulate it electronically to the commission members, and I think you all will find it very instructive, and so probably a discussion of it. It might be good for you all actually to have a chance to review it first and then have a discussion of it.
This is the trial court opinion?
It's the Court of Appeals opinion.
Appeals opinion. Wow. That's very good. All right. Anything else? Can we hear a motion?
Move to adjourn.
All right, got a motion to adjourn in a second.
Second?
Motion's on the table to adjourn, no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, see you in August.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.